We have a very special guest today, and this guest is celebrating a major milestone. 10 years in business building some of the most respected boutique analog gear in the industry. Chris Yetter is the co-owner and operator of Audioscape Engineering, a Daytona Beach, Florida-based manufacturer of handcrafted, U.S.-made recreations of classic recording equipment. Audioscape is lived by a simple philosophy: zero compromise, boutique quality at a reasonable cost. This commitment has earned Audioscape gear a home in the racks of some of the biggest names in the music business. 10 years, countless hand-built units, and a reputation built one circuit at a time. Chris Yetter, welcome to the show again, my man. How are you?
All right. Well, it's different to be here as the only guest, so that's kind of cool. It's been a while, actually, since we checked in and did one of these. I think when we first started the podcast, we did the first episode was like this. It was just you and me. And I think it's after 10 years, it's cool to have a recap as well and sort of, let everyone know the state of Audioscape and what's going on.
Awesome. Well, take us back to day one. What was the moment you decided to start Audioscape, and what were those days like in the shop?
I think the key word there is days. It's hard for me to pinpoint a day one. It's sort of built up to this. As you know from knowing me back then too, Justin, there was the pedal company first with CBC pedals, and I was doing that, and I was pretty happy doing that. But I think if I could zero in on a day one, is when I walked into a studio with a bunch of boutique gear, and I could see the difference that it made in the final result versus maybe a studio that had nice gear that was well known, but the care and craftsmanship that went into this boutique gear and this equipment, these tools we were using, I could definitely tell there was something different going on. There was something special. And that was probably, for me, in my mind, it was day one. It wasn't the first day I executed the company, but that's when I knew that this is what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do, for my life's work, basically.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of people see Audioscape, the brand now, and, everybody's like, it's overnight success, and I got to revert back to the story of on the band breaks when you were in the band as a guitarist and backup singer, lead singer at times. And during your 15, 20-minute breaks, everybody would want to know, where's Chris? Where's Chris? And we already knew he was in the van researching. And you were researching pedals, and you had your eBay page up. And I remember times when certain well-known guitarists would buy gear from you, and we were both like, holy cow, what? So your growth has been more than just an overnight success. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I would say.
Yeah, I would equate it to just basically every day is like laying a brick, and building this foundation of this thing. And that's what it leads to. Even if if you've heard of us, maybe that is what it seems, but maybe you've heard of our Opto, which is one of our most popular products, but I was laying that brick in 2017, and, or just finding these, finding people that sell tubes or go to tube swap meets and finding these rare parts and doing this stuff. I was doing that early on because to me, that was the only way to build something. I didn't know that I was completely oblivious to how things are being built. So every day I just kept laying a brick of something, of this building that is Audioscape, I guess.
Now, you use the most vintage accurate parts available. How difficult was it to research at the very beginning to try to find the NOS tubes and the composition resistors and all of that?
When we started, I think it was easier actually than it is today. It's a lot more difficult because when I started, you could still buy carbon composition resistors on Mouser, the authorized dealers. You could still find this stuff. It was more of a specialty, but it was there. And now it's, as more SMT and smaller parts become the norm, it's very hard to find these parts nowadays, but they're still there. You have to search them out. And it's just maybe a chef getting these custom ingredients or something like that, I would equate it to. But that is definitely half the battle these days, is finding new old stock tubes and finding carbon composition resistors, Styroflex caps like you see in the Neves. They don't sell those on Mouser anymore, so like good luck, so that's probably one of the more difficult things that we deal with every day. And I don't think people realize just how like finite everything we build is. It's very, yes, we'll have to make some adjustments, if we need to, but like at a certain point, if we can't build something, we just won't, Yeah.
Now, in getting those parts, you said it's more difficult to find. Is that because they're running out of those parts?
Well, for instance, it's case by case basis. So like with the carbon composition resistors, they make the die for that in Japan, and they stopped making that for like a year or two. So like the supply, and then they started making it again, luckily. Somebody probably went crazy. Someone like myself probably went ape shit and just like got them to do it. And I am grateful for that person. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's case by case. New old stock tubes, like sometimes, like right now I'm having a hard time finding new old stock 12BH7s. So if anyone has some, hit me up,
Now, how difficult is it to possibly create your own tubes?
Oh, that's a whole can of worms. And I know there's someone in the U.S. that's rebooting it that has the Western Electric trademark, I believe. And they might be in Georgia. They might be somewhere there in the Southeast, actually, that they're looking to do their own version, like a modern, like real version of like a 12AX7 and like a lot of the standard fare tubes that we use in pro audio equipment, guitar amps, things like that. So, I'm hoping there's a path for that, but that's very specialized tooling and knowledge that unfortunately a lot of it was lost to time. And, kudos to Mike Matthews for actually keeping it alive, with the Russian factory over there with new sensor and that. At least we have that. So, right. Yeah.
Now, discussing, the manufacturing, and you do everything end to end at your facility in Daytona Beach. Why was it important to keep production, everything in-house, and specifically in the USA?
I don't think that, it just goes back to my own ignorance of how this industry works. Completely an outsider. A lot of companies that do this kind of thing, they're based in California. We're based in Florida. I just very much like our customers now was just somebody that wanted this stuff. So I didn't think in terms of like, how do I scale this? How do I this is not a business mentality that with how Audioscape grew. Yes, we adapted, but basically I didn't know the only time I realized was the first time I went to NAMM. I was like, oh, we're doing this the hard way. I just thought maybe it was a 1950s, 60s mentality that, you build the thing and then you just build the next thing and, and there's some enjoyment into that. And I really enjoyed building equipment and finding things, making things work or, if something's broken, figuring out why it's broken. I've always enjoyed that. So that, it calms me. I'm a workaholic. So I never really thought that there was a different, more efficient way to do it, but sometimes more efficient ways, there's compromises made in that. Yeah. And, I think I sort of went too far in that direction to go and compromise. I already know what it can be. So it's there's no turning back,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the approach to your manufacturing is, essentially the opposite of modern production, embracing the unit-to-unit differences that come with hand-built tolerance parts. So if somebody was constantly a buyer of these mass-produced gear and they're interested into an Audioscape boutique gear, can you explain to them the differences and the pros and cons between something that is hand-built compared to something that is coming off the line in the factory?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think ultimately it's good that there are some devices that exist like this, because, maybe somebody buys something like that and they at least start to understand why hardware is viable, why, you get a connection with feeling something real. And then at a certain point, everyone is like this. They want the best for themselves that they can afford. This is their craft. And, so maybe they start learning a little bit more about us and what we do. But there's so many different ways you can approach this and discussing how it's different. The parts, a lot of times, if you have something that's mass produced, they'll imagine like legs on a table, right? There's 4 legs on a table, and they advertise that this one leg is awesome, holding up this table. And then the other ones are just like almost sawdust, like what's going to happen to the thing as a whole, reliability wise, and sonically, what's it going to sound like? So yes, congratulations. You have made a table that will, is built to not last. So, that's a good way to describe that end of it. And then there's also the people and the intention side of it. Like, it's such a different thing to me. It's like worlds apart, So it's really hard to compare, because when we started out Audioscape, 10 years, the first few years, once I started trying to hire people to do this and train people, we could have a whole episode of just this, like
just on that part of it.
we hired like some people from Craigslist. So you can imagine how well that went. Yeah. And the Craigslist stories, they are juicy. Maybe we should just do another episode on this, and I'll just go through and I won't use real names or anything, but anyways, these people were not like qualified. Not just qualified, but there was no passion. It's not even the qualifications. It's something we've sort of over the last 10 years come up with called GAF, give a fuck factor. Yeah. And basically, if having people build that are artists, engineers, like, they do live sound, having people that are in this field actually build this equipment, it's priceless for like, that's what we like, because otherwise, I learned this lesson in the first few years. If you get someone that's not into music and the care level's not there, then you're not going to have someone that can get it in their brain easily and how to differentiate between something that's good coming off the production, cue here, or something that's not. So you really can't put a price on that. So just, you might, if something's mass produced, they might be making, a PCB for an Xbox, one day, and then they'll be making a PCB for this audio device. And it's like, there's definitely something to be said for that. It's a lot of it's intangible, but it's not really when you listen to the final product. So, as much as we graph and we get super nerdy with things like, make sure we document noise levels and that QA, really everything is about, is this device fun to use? Like, is this inspiring me? We're looking for the most character out of anything that we build, and not necessarily the most noticeable character, but like the best version of what that thing can be, but also the uniqueness of it. And like every piece being unique within a certain range. And that range, I feel like, because of the parts we use, is a lot wider maybe than some other manufacturers. So
good point. Now, in the process of developing and prototyping all these different units, has there been one that has been extremely challenging that you're just like want to pull your hair out? And I think I know which one it is, but I'm not going to mention it unless you do.
Truth be told, they're all very difficult. Like designing products is not. Sometimes it's not fun. It's very tedious, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of debugging. And I'm grateful I have some people that can help me along the way that I lean on for advice. I'm like, hey, I'm stuck. What would you do next year? Like, we've isolated the problem here, but where should I look? Like having people to bounce ideas off of when that happens is great. To answer your question though, I mean, I guess the one that's taken the longest is the fair comp, obviously.
Yes, that's the one.
That one has taken the longest for various reasons. I mean, sometimes it's such a big, ambitious project to do properly that there's been times where I just would get stuck on one section for years at a time. The last one I had to clear, which took about 2 years, was the bias section. And
really,
there's multiple reasons for that. And a lot of the things that I ran into problems on are like things that get omitted in modern recreations of this device. So like it makes sense that I would hit a wall on this stuff, like the bias supply, the tube power supply. Like it makes sense that why people are like, screw this, I'm going in a different direction. Like
you can understand the frustration.
I totally get it. Yeah. Like, so basically what was going on with the bias supply, and this was, a couple reasons, couple things. Wall voltages, many people know this. They were a lot lower back when the Fairchild was made. And, 117 was the standard. Now 125 is the standard, but really those swings are a lot wider. So, the bias transformer, the original one, was this little stand core guy. I probably have one around here somewhere, and it was literally melting. Like after being on for a few hours, and the goop inside the transformer would literally melt. So I had to find a beefier bias transformer, not change anything circuit wise, but just one that could take the punishment of the heat. Literally a transformer that could take the heat. So, but before that, I had tried everything under the sun. I had tried like dropper resistors, all the stuff that were taking the heat so I could keep the original little dinky stand core. And it was like one of those things. It was like the meter in the 260 VU, like why we have a meter that looks similar, but it's actually a different construction than the original bead meters, because why would you manufacture something that will fail quickly, so it's, those decisions have to be made a lot of times. And they're some of the most difficult things, just little hurdles to jump like that. I could go into some of the other stuff like the matrix switching that, held me up earlier in the process on that. And just even understanding that device, lat vert, and just wrapping your head around that, I think was, when starting out the first few years, and like, cause I'm consistently checking stereo devices. So it's hard to get out of that frame of mind. So,
now how is the Fair Comp coming along?
So basically it's being, I guess, held up would be a good way to say it, because of our production queue. Because like right now, 10 years in, even our 10th year versus our 9th year, we have 4 times the amount of orders than we had last year.
Oh, damn.
So that's a good problem to have, but it is still a problem nonetheless. So what's going on is with the Fair Comp is our technical director there on site, Matt, and myself, like we've built some. We got a few of them already built up, but they haven't been integrated into our production process fully yet. So we're in the process of that, but it's, with that demand and, getting people's orders out, it's, you have to answer the question, do you take time to build that? Or, these people, who, have been waiting for a while for something that they've purchased, do we build that? So like, that's kind of, obviously we're going to choose the latter and take care of people, with current orders that are out before we do something like that. That would be kind of irresponsible. So
yeah, I mean, Audioscape is always taking care of its customers no matter what. And, all your product comes with the hassle-free 2-year warranty. And your team is really committed to making things right, no matter how long the customer may have owned the product. How important is that relationship with the customers to building the reputation over the past decade?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about, GAF, right? Where, these are our products, these are our babies. We care about them. So we always want them working tip top shape. So it doesn't matter if it's out of warranty, we're going to make sure it's taken care of. So if there's ever a problem with something, don't sweat something being 5 years old, whatever, just hit us up. Like, we got you and we'll take care of it and make sure that, we get you up and running as quickly as possible. Sometimes it could just be something simple and remote. Sometimes, you may have to send it in, but, we're not going to charge you an arm and a leg. I think, most people would agree who've gone through this process that it's very, very reasonable, especially compared to the rest of our market. So
yeah, absolutely. And I believe that customer relationship that you have with your clients is superb, right? You know, in today's day and age, we're getting in touch with, hell, here's an example. I was locked out of my Microsoft account because I bought a new phone. You know what? It took them 13 days to call me after I put in a request, and another 3 days to get my email, calendar, OneDrive, and everything active. So 2 weeks for a multi-billion-dollar company. That has to say something about catering to the customers. And for a small company like yours that is just continuously growing, that has to be and will be your number one strength, aside from the equipment, obviously. But the customer service you guys provide is spot on, 100%.
No, thank you. And, you know, I one thing I really, you know, there's not much I actually take pride in, but like seeing like people that like we used to sell like on eBay. We didn't even have a website, right? And seeing like some names that would come through back then, because I remember like you know, like just about almost every order, and then still in like this year, 10 years later, still seeing some of those same names come through is like that to me. That's like one of those moments where it's like, all right, you know, like that's to me, that's special and that's cool, you know?
Yeah, that's worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
It really
I mean,
is.
if there's anything I value, it's something like that more than like, oh, we've grown this big or blah, blah, you know, like I really do like, that's cool to me.
Yeah.
You know?
And I imagine the dialogue, you know, behind the glass in studios and amongst other engineers and producers is very similar experience. You know, and to have that dialogue going on in the industry, that really builds more momentum for your company.
Yeah, everything, you know, was built on that. I mean, yes, we have like some ads on social media now after 10 years, but like literally like the units for like 7-8 years just spoke for themselves. Yeah. Literally, they went in someone's studio, they used them and they spoke for themselves. And that's why it's here. So like, I know people, you know, are like, oh, ads and blah. And I'm, you know, there's a part of me that's cynical like that as well. But like, literally, that's why it's there. You know, it's you may have just heard of it and that you might be getting blasted with that. Okay, sorry, but like not sorry at the same time.
Right. Yeah. You know, I don't know if you remember, but you know, when we were in the industry as musicians and engineers, as producers, there was, you know, that common saying of a band sold out, right? Because now they're everywhere on the radio and everything like that.
That was big in the 90s. I remember that.
Yeah. And my response to that was, well, quit buying their shit. You're the reason they've blown up. Yeah. Right? So it's almost out of your hands at that point. When you build such a great product, the market's going to determine where you're at in the pillars, right?
Yeah. No, This is true. Yeah.
You know, so the last 10 years and beyond have been amazing, right? And they're going to continuously to grow into the marketplace. So do you have any idea what maybe the next 10 years could possibly look like? Is there something new coming on?
You know, we're always, I want to say more of the same, but not. As we grow, we definitely want to keep releasing as many new products as possible, keeping that going. I think building an infrastructure now where hopefully we can start stocking some equipment. We'll see. You know, fingers crossed on that. But you know, still very much, I still have the same excitement I have on like that day one you described for this. Like I still like I'm in a basement right now. Like we get done with this podcast, I'm going to go work on something that, you know, caught fire, but I'm going to get it working. And it's you know, like I enjoy this. So like, it's going to be, you know, the next 10 years is going to just be sort of, I guess, evolving just like the last 10 years.
Yeah. That's great. You know, and going back to the passion that you have about it, you know, you have a passion for troubleshooting. And that plays such a critical role in making the pieces correct. You know, and I think without that, you're going to get that basic manufactured piece of equipment from the assembly line. but the way that you're handling it with your hands on with everything, it's just, I love it. The passion bleeds through the equipment.
Well, it's funny, we were talking about components earlier, and I feel like part of why certain things are manufactured this way today is, sometimes it's intention. They want repeatability. They want things like that. But sometimes, especially if it's something that's vintage that they're trying to recreate, and they'll use more modern parts. It's that, but it's also a little bit of fear of I can't always get this part. So I think, at a certain point, you start to realize that, we're not making iPhones. We're not making something like this. There is a finite number in that of what you can do by doing that. And you do limit yourself in a sense to your production capability. But, at the same time, I feel like if you could find the best part to give something it's, the character it wants, that circuit wants, why not go find it? Why not go do that? Find these alternative means to go find that, instead of just relying with what's easy that you could filter and search at a, authorized distributor.
Sure. It's something unique is going on in a different industry, and that's the gaming industry. Right now, a lot of gamers by the thousands are buying old CRT monitors with the cathode tubes, I believe that is, because the graphics look better on that than they do on these new LED, LCD paneled televisions. And that's something very unique I never thought would occur within the gaming industry. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can buy a 72-inch fucking flat screen TV and play your game there, but they're finding more enjoyment going back to the old boxed monitors that weigh 30, 40 pounds. And I think that has to say something with how things were built, 30, 40, 50 years ago compared to how things are built today, and Audioscape's right in that line, right? You're maintaining the hardware to where it's definitely competitive with the new product line that may have just been built last year with the new, materials.
Things are built back then with intention. They weren't built to a price point to fail in a certain amount of years and then have you buy something it was unspoken, or to a certain degree, that you were expected to be a good consumer. I don't want to be wear the old man hat or whatever, but people in the 50s and 60s, they would go to the store and they would test their tubes, and they would, it was so much so that I had you mentioned a TV. I had a TV. This is one of the first TVs I could actually afford. That was a flat screen or whatever. And the power supply died in it. And, and I had my daughters, I was like, look, most people would throw this out, but I found the replacement power supply board. I showed them how to change it. And I'm not saying I do that with every piece of consumer device, but I made a point to show them that, you can actually not just dispose of things so easily. And, there is some merit in that. Obviously, a lot of merit in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Golden 58, right? That was a unique piece of equipment that Audioscape had created, and I know there is no longer. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The Golden 58, we stopped production, I want to say around 2023 on that, 24 maybe. Yeah.
Is anything on the horizon for another piece of Audioscape gear that's original?
Well, always. I mean, there's always some original stuff that's I have in development, but a lot of times, there's 15 to 20 things I'm working on at any given time. So, and sometimes they're really simple utility things. And so whatever sort of pops off first of me feeling really good about it, like the bun's ready to come out of the oven, that's usually what happens. And I love how we manufacture and produce, because we can fast track something once it's ready, to a certain degree. Not something like the Fair Comp, obviously, but something for instance, the AS78 which is one of my favorite things that we make. And that came pretty quick. versus something like the E-Bus, which is like 5 years of pulling my hair out and having to make some like very pointed decisions, and very intentional decisions that are outside the parameters of that the original, E-Series bus there.
Wow. Yeah. Now, can you speak a little bit about the Opto in terms of what transitions you've had to made in the past year or 2 years with it in regard to, is it the tube availability? What is it that you have run into with that?
So the Opto, we're discontinuing the Opto, which is one of our most popular products, because we've done the hinged panel version. So it's actually pretty much the same as, it's kind of funny. That product's pretty much the same as when I started building them in my garage in 2017. It's not any not really much different from back then. I think back then we may have used like a different input transformer or something like that, but it's evolved over, very, very little in that period of time. Now it's almost 10 years of that product,
Wow.
So, but yeah, it's got the hinge panel now. So we're shifting that to be the AS2A, and it is a little bit more than the Opto, but it's still, in my opinion, a steal for what you're getting. And I think, I'm glad you pointed out the Opto, because I do think that's a device where a 2A has a certain amount of character, but it doesn't have too much character. It's known to a certain extent to be a little bit more transparent. So, like transformer selection with that, tube selection with that's very, very critical and key, Yeah. So, and they're all like literally tube rolling something like that, like for the side chain and how that reacts. That's so important. I mean, you could spend as much time doing that and the quality assurance phase as you can building it, which is wild,
It's like having a cigar roller on site, but he's a tube roller.
Yeah. A lot of tube rolling going on for sure. I mean, and the same set of tubes that work in one because of the tolerances that sound amazing in one won't sound amazing in the other. So sometimes I like when people are like, oh, what tubes are in there? I want to tube roll myself. Like I die a little inside because like we've already done that. Like we've had that repeatability of building the same thing and know that like the variances that are there. And then we know like what we want to get out of it, So
yeah, wow. Well, congratulations, my man, on 10 years of building an outstanding company of Audioscape. And is there anything as we close out on this episode that you'd like to say for the future coming up?
I would say, look out for, we're going to definitely have a few curveballs in the next few years. Be on the lookout. And I'm excited. We're going to be up at AES this year coming up soon, and then NAMM again. So, maybe we'll do a Sonic Truth episode when we're up there in Nashville doing AES. So
I like that.
Yeah, should be
great.
Should be a fun year. Let's just stay tuned. That's all I'll say. I'll zip my lip.
Just stay tuned. There are things on the horizon. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time today, Chris, and I look forward to what Audioscape has to provide in the coming years, my man.
All right. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Bye-bye.